Hey Meeple people, this is Meeples on the Ground, and today we are playing The Adventure Zone, Bureau of Balance by Twogether Studios. Let's weave a story.
Reclaimers, the Bureau of Balance has a mission for your team, so gear up and get to the launch bay. Your team leader will give you the details, but you know what you signed up for. Some villain has gotten a hold of a powerful relic, and now the fate of the world is once again in our hands. Get down there, grab that relic, and when you get back, the first round of the Chug and Squeeze is on the house. If you fail, well, there's always next time. We hope.
Hello Meeple people, and hello Sarah.
Hi.
So what are we playing today?
Today we're playing The Adventure Zone Bureau of Balance by Twogether Studios. They sent us this copy. Thank you very much. It is a 2 to 5 player game that is sort of like a board gamification of a role-playing experience. So it is set in a universe called The Adventure Zone, which was established in a podcast of the same name, I believe, where this family plays an RPG together, I think is what it is. I'm not very familiar with it, but this family plays like an RPG together, I believe, and they have like this podcast where they talk about their adventure zone and like all of these adventures that they go on in their game and everything like that. So this is a board game set in that sort of fictional universe of the Adventure Zone. I am sure it is chock full of references to the source material, but because I'm not familiar with that source material, most of them are going to go over my head.
Or even like, we don't even really play RPGs, so...
Yeah, I actually was like, why is the first player token like this like jellyfish creature that doesn't seem to like mesh with the rest of this universe? But then I realized that this is in the podcast. This is like a character from the podcast. So there's probably tons of stuff like this throughout this game, and if you're familiar with the podcast, you may like, you know, see some of the references or that kind of thing. We're not all that familiar with the podcast, obviously, so like we said, a lot of these are going to kind of fly right by us without us even noticing.
But you, the viewer, might understand more than we will.
So whether you're familiar with the podcast or not, this is actually a really fun game. And it, like I said, it's kind of the board gamification of an RPG. So if you have never played an RPG, then this might be a nice sort of really soft introduction to one, because it kind of holds your hand through some of the aspects about an RPG which might be a little bit intimidating to approach if you've never played one before. Like, there's a huge amount of storytelling in this game, but they don't put any pressure on you to sort of like have to come up with creative storytelling ideas on the spot. There's not a huge amount of pressure to do that. For example, one of the very first things that you do when you start the game, and excuse all of my like little typos and my terrible art and stuff like that, but one of the very first things that you do when you start a game is you are assigned a role. So I'm the rogue, and you give your character a name, and you can draw like a picture of them. Nick's picture of his warrior Brock is meh. Pretty darn good, especially compared to my
I like yours.
My rogue. This is Roma Lisa, and in addition to giving her a name and a sort of likeness, I also have some questions to answer about her, which is going to kind of solidify a little bit of like her background and stuff like that. So I'm a rogue, and I'm also a hobby birder. I am stronger against traps, which is one of the things that we might encounter in the game, and Roma Lisa is particularly well skilled to handle traps, and I am that way because of my ex-boyfriend Fred Jones. And finally, I am generally assist my teammates with my, my stoic wisdom. So you establish your name and your likeness, as well as some sort of like
flavor text.
Yeah, some like flavor for your character. And then...
And backstory, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, and sort of like backstory or flavor to provide, you know, some context for your character. And then Each player has some sort of specific things that they're particularly well suited to do, or like special abilities that are unique to them, or that kind of stuff. So for me, I'm a treasure hunter, and that means that when I draw a certain type of card, which normally you'd only get to draw one of, I actually get to draw 2 of those cards, and then I can choose which one I'd like to keep. And then it also affects my stats here. My stats are a little bit different than anybody else's in the game. So this sort of dashboard sort of keeps track of all of this information for me as we go throughout the game. And then there's also a section here where I can keep notes if I feel like I need to do that as we play through the game. So that's sort of like our dashboard, where we sort of like start off. To begin the game, we introduce our characters to one another. So I've introduced you to Roma Lisa. Nick, would you like to introduce us to Brock?
Sure. This is Brock. He is a warrior. Let's see. You are a warrior and a skilled blacksmith.
Okay.
You are strong against monsters, mostly because of your elite strategies. And you generally assist your teammates using your foresight. I also am reckless. I have a reckless charge. Before you roll the dice to defeat a challenge, you may spend an action token to suffer 1 damage, but add +2 to your strength.
Okay, nice. So that's, those are sort of like the party, right? These are the party members that are going to go out on the adventure. And this kind of gives you like an introduction to who they are as people, but also what they sort of bring to the party, skill-wise.
Yeah, and then some cards will ask you like, hey, what about this? What about that? And you can make a story off of your character and what your character wants. So it kind of gets you in that, like we said, it's a, beginner starter kind of thing to RPGs, and gets you kind of in the feel and the mood of like what RPGs are, about, and how you can kind of get comfortable with talking about backstory and getting goofy with your character, or getting like serious, like this is epic battle, his battle axe stormed right through the skull of my enemies and all that stuff. But
so another way that we sort of have that storytelling like come out in the game is that at the start of the game we set up sort of 3 things that we're going to sort of like interact with throughout the game.
Yeah.
One is a villain. So in this game, we're interacting with the dragon as our villain. The other is the relic that we're attempting to protect from this particular villain, right? So we're supposed to be this group of like adventurers who goes out and secures relics that villains are trying to get a hold of so that we can keep them out of the bad guys' hands. Well, this hoard is the relic that we're going to be attempting to save from the dragon this game. And finally, the hoard is located in the tomb. And there are some sort of story elements to each of these, and I'll read those to you now. So the hoard is a treasure which is legendary, and many greedy adventurers hope to claim it. You'll have to deal with these deadly rivals as well as curses and traps laid on the hoard itself. And right now we'll answer the question, who gathered the hoard, and what's one thing that you hope to find in it? So this is another way that
storytelling can kind of be brought out.
Exactly. So who gathered up the hoard, Nick?
Goblins.
Okay, so goblins have gathered this hoard, and what's something that you hope to find in the hoard?
A nice, shiny material to make weapons out of.
Nice, okay. I think that I would like to find a really soft, nicely fitting t-shirt in the hoard.
Softest t-shirt of the land.
Exactly. So that's the relic that we're going to be attempting to secure throughout this game. It is located in the tomb, and the tomb, it says, deadly traps and vengeful ghosts guard the ancient treasures interred in this tomb. What is the name of the tomb, and do you know who's buried there?
The name of the tomb will be the many, the many fallen goblins of, since the goblins are defending it or trying to get it.
Okay, so like maybe the tomb of the many fallen goblins?
Sure.
And who's buried here? I'm going to say that Mike is buried here.
Okay.
Mike's buried in the tomb. So that's our location. And finally, the villain that we are attempting to protect the horde in the tomb against is the dragon, who is ancient and powerful and is determined to destroy you. You must survive its attack and press forward until you have an opportunity to defeat it once and for all. What is the dragon's name and what does it look like?
Sheldon.
Sheldon the dragon. Okay, I think that Sheldon the dragon actually is about 2 feet tall, and when he tries to blow fire, he just has like little smoke that just sort of puffs out of his nose very gently.
But the smoke is poisonous.
Okay, that took a turn. So this is sort of our setup for this game. Now, there are different locations and relics and villains that you can set up each game, but each one of them has sort of a deck that's related to them, and they'll tell you on the back of this card, in addition to the story elements, they'll tell you if there are any special rules for this particular deck of cards, for the setup, for how they're played, that kind of stuff. For example, in this game, we had to set up the I believe it was the Horde, right? In a particular order. So the cards in the Horde deck go in a particular order as dictated by this card here. Additionally, our dragon villain, when we encounter him and attempt to defeat him, if we fail, normally the cards would just stay on the top of the deck if you fail. But for the dragon, if you fail, you discard the card after taking damage. So that's going to establish some, like I said, it's going to establish some backstory for the game. It's also going to provide you with any special rules related to each of these decks here. Now, these decks here are how the game is going to end if, well, it's one of 2 ways that the game could end. If adventurers can deplete completely any 2 of these 3 decks here, then we win the game. If, however, our health is depleted completely, then we lose the game. So these are the sort of things that we're going to be attempting to do. They're kind of like missions that we go on. For example, in the tomb, while making a perilous climb, we have to try to survive a perilous climb. And so we'll do that by making sort of like a skill check against this type of
monster.
This type of sort of, this sort of encounter, right? And there are different kinds of encounters. You can see them down here. There's monsters, spooky, magic, traps, and those are all things that we might encounter as we play the game. Now, like I said, I am particularly well suited to deal with traps, and Nick is particularly well suited to deal with monsters. Additionally, throughout the game, we may have some companions or helpful items which will join us that may help us to counter certain things that we're maybe not particularly well suited for. Or you get the fanny
pack of holding.
That's what Nick got last game. So for example, like I said, in this game, Nick is particularly well suited to defeat monsters, and I'm great at traps. However, we don't have anybody in our party that's particularly good with magic or with spooky. So perhaps as we play, we may need to bring some of these people in who can help us with things like that. So the last thing that we'll talk about before we get started is this deck right here. This deck is cool stuff that you can acquire from Fantasy Costco as you play the game, like the fanny pack of holding that Nick mentioned. It's neat stuff. Sometimes it's like a companion or an item or that kind of thing. Typically, players can only hold 2 of these items, but sometimes you'll be able to hold more depending on what they are or if you have special abilities or that kind of thing. But these are items that are essentially going to aid us in our various quests to protect the horde in the tomb from the dragon. So what's going to happen is on your turn, you're going to select one of these sort of things that you're going to attempt to deal with. And this number right here is going to tell you the base value of this encounter. And then sometimes there might be modifiers near it or around it or throughout the game. So for example, this one right here, we must take cover. And in order to beat this, it has a base rate of 7, but this right here is boosting that by 1. So this is actually going to be an 8 that we have to roll against to see if we can actually take cover successfully. So what would happen is on your turn, you would select one of these missions to go on, and then you would assemble sort of like your value on this track right here. So if I was doing this one, because I'm well suited at traps, I start with a base of 4. So I'm going to go ahead and move this up to 4. Then if I had any items or a companion or something like that that would further boost me, I would move this up a little bit more. Additionally, other members of my party can assist me for extra points to this value down here. Eventually we're going to get to a point though where I'm ready to go. I've got all my stuff, I've got my companions, I've got my armor, like let's go head into the encounter. When I do that, I'm going to take this number here and I'm going to add it to a die result. So I'm going to roll this die and I'm going to add that number to this value. So in this case here, I had a 4, I rolled a 2, my total is a 6. Unfortunately for this card though, I did need an 8 in order to actually successfully take cover. So if this is what had happened, I would fail at this one here and I would have to take damage in the amount shown here. So we would lose 2 health, and this is like the
party's health.
The entire party's health. So the entire party would lose 2 health, and I would fail this challenge. Now, normally it would stay on the top of the deck, and other players could attempt it, or even I could attempt it again on a future turn. However, because this one is special, it's one of the dragon cards, we would actually go ahead and discard this one, since I was not able to successfully encounter that. Now, if I had successfully encountered it, I would get to keep the card, and that's important because of this number right down here. Anytime you acquire 3 or more of these sort of diamonds, you can use those to purchase cards from Fantasy Costco in the amount of 1 card for 3 or more diamonds. But if you have to overspend, you don't get additional cards or anything like that. So if I only have cards that have 2 diamonds each on 2 cards, I'd spend 4 diamonds to get 1 card from Fantasy Costco. My particular character has the ability that it's a treasure hunter, so I would get to draw 2 cards and then keep 1, but for the most part, players would just draw 1 for every 3 or more diamonds that they turn in at the end of their turn. And then you'd get a Fantasy Costco item that you'd get to add to your sort of like stash. You can share those cards with other players. So if you come up with something in Fantasy Costco that you don't really need but might be good for another member of your party, you can sort of give it to them. Or if you're already like at your max capacity and another player isn't, then you can give them one of your items instead, so that instead of having to just discard it, it does get to stay in the party. I think for the most part, that is everything. Should we get started?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So let's go ahead and jump into the Adventure Zone Bureau of Balance by Twogether Studios, and we'll get back to you guys midway through the game. So, toodles! Hello, Sarah. So how goes it?
It goes well. I think we're almost finished with the game. We have just completely defeated the dragon. So we're all the way through his deck, and we have just a couple cards left in the Tomb deck. Anytime you get through 2 of the 3 decks, the game is over. We are doing pretty good on health. We have 8, and we have a method to gain health back if we...
Yeah, we also got some people that we haven't been really using, but kind of that would give us some health back.
Yeah, so we can accumulate some health if we feel like we need to. We've only got a couple cards left on our second... pile here to win. So I think we're doing pretty well. I've got some nice things. I have a fanny pack of holding, which lets me hold additional items. Normally you can only have 2 items, but the fanny pack lets you hold any number of items. So I've got that, and I've got some other cool stuff. Nick's got some equipment that's been useful for us. We have... Yeah, so I think it's going well.
Yeah, doing well. We're having a lot of fun. We're laughing at a lot of the opportunities they give us for storytelling, and it's been goofy. It's been like, oh my goodness, and it's been just really fun to kind of flex that creativeness.
It really has. I usually really dislike storytelling games because I don't really like to be put on the spot to be creative like that. So normally I really don't enjoy storytelling games very much. It's just not the kind of thing that I typically have a good time doing. But this one, it's really bite-sized pieces, right? Like we were talking about at the beginning of the game that you kind of had to set up your backstory by answering these questions. They're just such little tiny pieces that I feel like it's easy to do. Another way that the storytelling comes into play is that sometimes when you go up against a let me find a card here. When you go up against a particular challenge, they'll give you, here's one, they'll give you an opportunity to add to your stats to beat that challenge if you tell a little bit of a story, right? So for example, this one was that we were encountering a challenge while visiting the break room. And it says, this is where all the monsters that work in the tomb relax between shifts. Who do you find there? And if you are willing to answer that question and give a little bit of story detail, then it boosts your stats a little bit. So Nick said that he found one of the skeletons from the tomb was in the break room, chilling out and having a massage. And because Nick was willing to add to the story a little bit, he got a little bit of a boost to his die results. And I think that implementation of the storytelling part of the game really cuts out like any pressure that one would feel to come up with like creative answers or to be clever or, you know, anything like that. It really takes off that edge of being like put on the spot to come up with something creative, because they're just simple little questions. They kind of set it up a little bit for you, like here's a situation, what happens next, or what do you want to call this, or what happens in this situation. And they set up these like no pressure situations where you can just kind of have fun and answer the question, or have fun and spin like a little two sentence story that kind of increases the
experience that you're having.
Exactly. And it really feels very, very low pressure, which is really nice for me in particular, because like I said, I usually don't enjoy being put on the spot to be creative with something like that. So typically I don't really enjoy that storytelling aspect of games, but I feel like it's handled really, really beautifully in this game. Plus, like Nick said, it's just been a ton of fun. This is the second time that we've played this. We always play like a practice game off camera before we do one on camera, so that we just kind of know how everything works and know the flow of the game, and we've figured out that we know what we're doing kind of thing. And in both this game and the practice game, I have laughed over things that we've come up with for this storyline more than I've laughed at some of the other games that we've played in a while. And it's not normally the kind of game that I would be attracted to, but I think that it's actually a really, really fun game. And I think that the theme is really well implemented. We actually feel like we're kind of like
an adventuring party going through this.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually think that this game is a lot of fun. I'm glad we gave it a try. It's like I said, it's not something I normally probably would have been like very excited to try. Even when we opened it up and I was like reading through the rules and stuff, I was like, I don't really know if I'm going to like this very much, but it's actually been a lot of fun. That's a little bit of our closing thoughts. I just like kind of jumped ahead a little bit, but I'm just enjoying this. This is just a lot of fun. So
it is.
Should we get back to it, Nick? We're almost done.
Yes, let's get back to it. We have defeated the dragon. We are probably going to go ahead and try to finish the tomb. The Horde had a lot of tricky things.
Nemesis in it. Our Nemesis was chilling out in the Horde, and the Nemesis card would have made us battle it again and again and again.
It actually made other challenges harder.
Yes. So because it kind of came up fairly early in the game, and because we only have to defeat 2 out of these 3 sort of stacks, we said, what if we just left the Nemesis alone entirely? We just won't mess with the Horde, and we'll try to cycle through the dragon and the tomb instead, so we don't even have to worry about our Nemesis continually popping up and causing havoc for us.
Indeed. All right, well, let's get back to it, of our game of The Adventure Zone Bureau of Balance by Twogether Studios. Yes. All right, toodles. Why, hello, Sarah. So, and welcome back, our Meeple people. What happened?
So, Romalisa the Rogue and Brock the Warrior have successfully defeated the dragon in the tomb and won the game.
awesome. we have conquered this adventure, and we can go back to the chug and squeeze.
Yes, so the local
Yay.
tavern, I believe, in this universe is called the Chug and Squeeze, and because we've successfully completed our mission, the first round of drinks at the Chug and Squeeze is on the house.
Yay! Awesome.
I think this game is really fun. It's probably my favorite storytelling game ever. I think that it provides players with just enough structure to make players who might be unsure of their creativity or their storytelling talents to feel safe in this environment. But it provides them with enough, enough of a situation, enough of a stage to where they can kind of spread their wings a little bit and try their hand at some very, very no pressure storytelling in a fun and silly environment.
Yeah, and also the first player is like the kind of like the DM, the one that can kind of make sure everything's going smoothly, and maybe even the most comfortable person that is willing to encourage people like, hey, no, go ahead, try it.
Yeah.
And you can. This is definitely a fun one.
The first player, whoever's assigned the sort of, it's not called this, but whoever's assigned like the DM token or the GM token, they do a little bit to set up the game because each of the different item decks have to be set up a particular way. So based on which sort of items you choose to use, you'll have to set up the game like slightly differently. So they're responsible, the GM is responsible for going through and kind of setting everything up correctly for that particular play session. And then they're also, like sort of like the final say. So it's a cooperative game, but if we're having like a struggle coming to terms with, who should
help who.
Yeah, exactly. Then they can kind of help with that. And then also, like Nick was saying, you can kind of give that if they're amenable to the responsibility of it, which it's not a lot, but if they're okay with it, then you can kind of give them the responsibility of kind of like helping to smooth out any kind of things that arise with players who might not necessarily feel super comfortable like with the storytelling aspects. And like I said before, there's the commitment required for the storytelling aspect of this game is so light and so like no pressure that I really don't see anybody who would have like a ton of problem with this. Like I said, I kind of hate storytelling games most of the time because I feel like that, like I'm being put on the spot to like perform, to be creative. And I'm more like mathematically minded than like creatively minded. So for me, sometimes it feels like you're like, okay, go. And I'm like, I
don't want to go.
Oh yeah. But that this made it feel like it was easy.
No pressure.
Yeah. Like it was easy. There was no pressure, that it could just be like fun and silly and off the cuff. And it didn't have to be like super well thought out or, clever or even creative to a certain extent. So that really made this the most fun storytelling game I've ever played.
Yeah, and there is I think if I was to give this a gripe or something, the notes area is pretty small because you're supposed to kind of.
It is, but I would say the first time we played, I wasn't really sure how important it would be to take notes, so I took a lot of notes, and I kind of ran out of room. I had really cramped.
Yeah, but you're if the first player, the GM that we're kind of calling it, is keeping track of all these things. They can make things more method. Like they asked us, what was the dragon's name? Who's doing what to the horde? And what is the tomb called? So,
so I guess if I would have been like a better GM, probably I would have written down that information and maybe some other information that came up throughout the game, and then you could kind of draw on that. If you're like, if you have a player who's about to try to best the dragon, you could be like, okay, I can't remember what we decided to call him, but but you could be like, okay, you're about to best Gorgonzola the dragon, kind of thing. If you're like a better GM, you could collect sort of information to help the other players feel like they were further immersed or more engaged in the game.
And then people could walk away with like a story to tell their friends and family and be like, hey, I just played this awesome game and we were defeating Steve the dragon or Gorgon the dragon and the goblins that were his servants and all that, and just have a really, memorable experience, which is kind of like the point of RPGs. You go on this epic adventure and you roll the dice and you're helping each other out. So there's this just adventure kind of going through it. You're writing your own story.
I could never really get into RPGs because to me, in my mind, I can't find the lines that would like establish
like the rigid rules.
RPG.
That's like, okay, here it is.
It's just so like, okay, go. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, a lot of times people will be like, you find yourself in a meadow filled with fairies and a bear comes and what do you do? And I'm always like, I'm gonna go climb that tree. And it's like not something that the GM like was trying to get me to do like in any way. So I'm usually like completely oblivious to how RPGs are really like supposed to unfold, and I usually, like I said, I usually feel like really put on the spot to like perform in the best way for like the adventuring party and like what the GM is like kind of looking for in players and stuff like that. And I usually feel like all of this crazy pressure that most of it I bring on myself, right? But I do feel that, and with this one here, that like all of that was gone. The game held my hand through all of those instances where I could have suffered like any amount of like self-doubt or putting myself down for not having like a clever answer or an answer that made sense in the story, or the game just like swept all of that aside and was like, we're just gonna play this fun, simple, silly game, and it's not gonna be a big deal if you don't have like the best answer or anything like that.
It's your answer.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it was really fun.
Nice. Well, yeah. So we all hope you enjoyed this vlog of the Adventure Zone, the Bureau of Balance by Twogether Studios. We really enjoyed it, and if you like storytelling games, and if you want to get into more storytelling games, I hope we would recommend this.
I'd say if you like dice rolling games too,
yeah,
and if you don't mind cooperative games, that this would be one that you should definitely check out, even if storytelling isn't necessarily something that you enjoy all that much. Mm-hmm. If you like dice rolling, if you like co-op games, check this one out because it's good for those sort of categories as well.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, we hope you all enjoyed our vlog today, and we'll see you next time. Toodles!